First classic auto repair became mine. Some might call that luck, but they didn't know my family. My earliest memory of the shop is the tang of motor oil in the air, and Dad's steady voice teaching me how to change a tire at 8 years old. "Pay attention, Daniel," he'd say, his calloused hands guiding mine. "One day, this place will be yours." Mom hated that I spent time at the shop. "He should be studying, not playing mechanic," she'd snap, glaring at my grease-streaked clothes. Emmy, my younger sister, would smirk over her textbook, already the smart one at 6, but Dad would just wink at me. "Book smarts aren't everything, Sarah. Our boy's got mechanical genius in his blood." I didn't see it then, but those moments laid the groundwork for everything that followed. Mom's disapproval sharpened over the years. Amy's smirks hardened into contempt, and those cracks in our family widened until they split us apart. The shop was Dad's legacy, a rundown garage transformed into the town's most respected auto repair business. While my peers played video games, I learned to diagnose engines by sound and feel, skills Dad said couldn't be taught in any classroom. Mom didn't understand that world. As a polished real estate agent, she lived for pristine appearances and pushed me to fit into her mold of success. "You could be so much more if you'd stop wasting time in that filthy garage," she'd say. But Dad always had my back. "He's already more," he'd argue. "This shop's been in the family for generations, and Daniel's got what it takes to keep it alive." The tug-of-war escalated as I got older, culminating in my senior year of high school. One quiet evening, Dad and I were rebuilding the engine of a '67 Mustang. The smell of grease, the hum of the radio, the comfort of shared silence. It was our world. And then it shattered. Dad clutched his chest, his face twisted in pain. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. A heart attack, the doctor said, sudden, massive, final. At the funeral, I stood between Mom and Amy, feeling like a stranger. Mom cried once we got home. But her tears weren't for Dad's loss. They were for the uncertainty ahead. "What will we do without the shop?" she sobbed. I stepped in, determined to honor Dad's dream, but Mom had other plans. "We should sell it," she declared. "The property's worth more than the business." "No," I said firmly. "Dad wanted me to take over. It stays in the family." Amy laughed. "Danny, you barely passed high school. How do you think you're going to run a business?" What they didn't know was that Dad had prepared me for this moment. From balancing the books to building customer trust, he taught me everything. When the will was read, the shop was left solely to me. Mom and Amy were livid. "He's going to ruin it," Mom spat. But Dad's faith in me was stronger than their doubts. The months that followed were brutal. Mom dropped by the shop unannounced, sowing seeds of doubt among the staff. Amy monitored my finances like a hawk, pointing out every dip in profits while ignoring industry-wide slumps. They even tried to sway longtime customers with their concerns about my leadership. But loyalty Dad had built over decades couldn't be shaken. Customers like Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Rodriguez believed in me because they'd seen Dad's faith in me firsthand. 6 months in, I made a bold move, hiring Mike, a seasoned mechanic. "We can't afford it," Amy protested, but I knew better. Mike's expertise let us tackle tougher jobs, and within 3 months, profits rose by 15%. Mom and Amy hated that success. One night, I found them in my office, rifling through my files. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Protecting the family legacy," Mom said smoothly. The next day, I changed the locks. Looking back, those early months taught me an invaluable lesson. The people closest to you can become your biggest obstacles. But Dad trusted me, and I'll keep proving he was right. This shop isn't just my inheritance. It's my responsibility, my passion, and my legacy. The first anniversary of Dad's death hit me harder than I expected. Late one evening, after closing up, I found myself at his desk, staring at the old family photo he kept there. It was from his surprise 50th birthday party. Everyone smiling, back when life seemed simpler. I clutched the frame like it could anchor me, lost in memories, when Mike, my lead mechanic, appeared in the doorway. "Your old man would be proud, kid," he said, his voice steady. "Shop's doing better than ever." Mike wasn't wrong. Against all odds, and my family's predictions, I'd not only kept the shop afloat but expanded its reach. Our customer base had grown by 30%, word-of-mouth referrals were surging, and I just paid off the last of Dad's equipment loans. On paper, I was thriving. But success, I was quickly learning, came with its own set of battles. The trouble started with a letter from Amy's law firm. Not from her directly, she wasn't a licensed attorney yet, but from a senior partner she worked for. It raised concerns about our environmental compliance, recommending a full audit of our waste disposal practices. I saw through it immediately. A month earlier, I'd refused to share the shop's financial records with Amy under the guise of her school project. This was payback. The audit disrupted operations for 3 days and drained thousands in consulting fees. But we passed without issue. Dad had always been meticulous about regulations, and I'd maintained his high standards. If Amy's approach was calculated, Mom's was personal. She began dropping by unannounced, often in the evenings when exhaustion made me more vulnerable. I ran into Joyce Miller today. She started one night, easing onto my couch uninvited. Her son just graduated business school, top of his class. He's looking for investment opportunities. I'm not selling, Mom, I interrupted. You're being stubborn, Daniel, she shot back. You're killing yourself here, just like your father. Is that what you want? To end up like him? Her words hit like a gut punch. Get out, I said quietly, my hands trembling. Daniel, I'm your. Get out. She left, but not before throwing a parting dagger. Your father made a mistake trusting you with his legacy. One day, you'll see that. The next morning, I discovered a slew of scathing online reviews accusing the shop of incompetence and dishonesty. The wording was eerily consistent, and while the IP addresses were masked, the culprit was clear. It took weeks to have the fake reviews removed, but the ordeal had an unexpected silver lining. Loyal customers rallied around us, posting glowing testimonials and sharing stories of Dad. One even brought homemade cookies for the staff. That's when I realized Dad's shop wasn't just a business. It was a cornerstone of the community. It wasn't just his legacy, it was ours. But Amy wasn't done. She escalated her campaign, gathering data she likely thought was her trump card. It all came to a head at Mom's birthday dinner. I almost skipped it, but Mike convinced me. Family's family, he'd said, even when they're a pain in the ass. The evening started pleasantly enough. Amy was all smiles, playing the perfect hostess. Then, just as dessert was served, she struck. We need to talk about the shop, she announced, pulling out a folder thicker than a phone book. I've been doing some analysis, and there are serious concerns. She launched into a presentation of charts and projections, painting a grim picture of mismanagement and financial instability. Her solution? Sell the shop while it still had value. Uncle Jack, Dad's older brother, cut her off. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. Your father trusted Daniel because he knew what he was doing, something you and your mother refused to acknowledge. Amy bristled. The numbers mean nothing if you don't understand the industry, Jack shot back. I've been in this business for 40 years. Daniel's not just keeping the shop alive, he's making it better. Your father would be proud. Mom stood abruptly, her face tight with anger. Jack, you don't understand. I understand plenty, he replied. You've spent your whole life underestimating that boy. But Robert knew his worth. It's about time you did too. The dinner ended in icy silence. As the guests left, Uncle Jack pulled me aside. Your dad asked me to keep an eye on you, he said, his voice softer now. He knew this wouldn't be easy, but he also knew you could handle it. Don't let them shake you, kid. You're doing good. His words were a bomb, but his parting warning lingered. They won't stop, Danny. Be ready. The next morning, I received notice of a formal complaint filed with the State Regulatory Board, courtesy of Amy. Another audit, more lost time and money. But as I looked around the shop, at Mike mentoring a new apprentice, at Mrs. Rodriguez's Corvette up on the lift, at the wall of photos showing 3 generations of Carters, it only strengthened my resolve. Dad had left me more than a business. He'd left me a purpose. No matter what Mom and Amy threw at me, I wasn't giving up. The war for Dad's legacy wasn't over, but for the first time, I knew I'd win. The state investigation dragged on for months. Each day brought more paperwork, endless demands for documentation, and new bureaucratic hoops to jump through. Amy's complaint was meticulous, designed to require an exhaustive investigation, even though there was nothing incriminating to find. I started sleeping in Dad's office most nights, too drained to drive home. Late one evening, while rummaging through a box of records, I found something unexpected in the bottom drawer, a weathered leather journal, worn smooth from years of use. It was Dad's. Most of the entries detailed shop business, notes about repairs, customers, and ideas for improvements. But one entry, dated just 2 weeks before he passed, stopped me cold. Sarah and Amy still don't see it. They remember Daniel as the kid who struggled in school, the son who didn't follow their expectations. But they don't see his gift, not just for cars, but for people. Today, I watched him reassure Mr. Peterson, explaining the repairs with care and respect. That's not something you learn in school. That's heart. And that's exactly what this shop needs. My hands shook as I read his words. Even then, he'd understood the battle I face and had believed in me. The next morning, Mike arrived early, looking uneasy. "Danny, we need to talk," he began. Apparently, Amy had approached him the night before with an offer, a lucrative job at a new shop she and Mom were planning to open across town. They already had investors and permits lined up. All they needed was a skilled mechanic to lend credibility, and Mike to bring our customer list. "She said they'd double my salary," Mike admitted, avoiding my gaze. My chest tightened. "And what did you say?" Mike finally met my eyes, his expression incredulous. "Are you kidding?" "I told her to shove it. Your dad gave me a chance when no one else would. I'm not turning my back on that, or on you." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by anger. Mom and Amy weren't just trying to compete, they were trying to dismantle everything Dad had built. I called Uncle Jack. "Not surprised," he said grimly after I explained. "Your mother's been making calls, drumming up interest with Dad's old associates. Time to put an end to this, Danny." The turning point came when Joyce Miller, a family acquaintance, showed up at the shop. She looked uneasy but resolute. "You need to see this," she said, pulling out her phone. The screen displayed a string of text messages from Mom, outlining their entire scheme. Mom had promised investors inflated profits, claiming she had insider knowledge of our operations. She'd assured them that once their shop opened, ours would collapse. "This isn't right," Joyce said firmly. "Your dad was a good man, and so are you. People deserve to know the truth." Armed with Joyce's evidence, along with documentation of other manipulations, Uncle Jack helped me draft a cease and desist letter. But before we could act, Amy called an emergency family meeting. Mom and Amy arrived in full force, dressed sharply, carrying a polished buyout offer. "We're giving you a chance, Daniel," Amy said, sliding the document across the table. "It's generous, more than the shop's worth. You can start over, maybe go back to school. It's what Dad would have wanted." The room went silent, everyone watching for my response. I took a deep breath, then pulled out my own folder. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "I have something to share." Piece by piece, I laid out the evidence, the fake reviews, the attempted employee poaching, the exaggerated promises to investors, and Joyce's messages. Then I pulled out Dad's journal and turned to the final entry. "Dad knew what he wanted," I said, meeting Mom's gaze. "He wrote it down." I read aloud the words he penned about me, his confidence in my abilities, his faith in my heart. Mom's face paled. Amy stared at the journal as though it might burst into flames. "So here's my offer," I said firmly. Stop the interference, the sabotage, the games. If you do, we can try to rebuild this family. If not," I gestured to the evidence spread across the table, "your investors won't want any part of this." Uncle Jack spoke up, his voice firm. "Robert always said Daniel had a good head for business. Looks like he was right again." Silence stretched across the room until Mom finally stood. Her voice, softer than I'd ever heard, broke the tension. "You sound just like him," she said quietly. For the first time, there was no contempt in her eyes, only something that looked like pride. Annie remained seated, her carefully crafted buyout offer forgotten. "We thought we were protecting his legacy," she murmured, "but we were just trying to control it." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. The investigation was dropped the following week, and the plans for their competing shop disappeared. Slowly, tentatively, we began to mend our fractured family. Mom now visits the shop occasionally, always bringing coffee instead of criticism. Amy focuses on her law career, but has taken on our legal contracts, this time ethically. The shop continues to thrive, expanding to a second location under Mike's leadership. The original shop still bears Dad's name, his picture watching over us from the wall. Next to it hangs a framed page from his journal, the entry where he believed in me. Every morning, I look at it and smile. Dad was right about so much. Some legacies aren't about money or success. They are about trust, heart, and the faith of a father in his son. And that's a legacy